you need a vehicle with more than 5 seats, but you're on a limited budget, or you don't want something huge. Well, we have a couple of options here for you to consider, and we're going to compare them today.
On the left, we've got the 2024 Volkswagen Tiguan Highline R-Line. And over here, we've got the 2024 Mitsubishi Outlander GT-Premium. Although it doesn't exactly line up, we decided to take out the plug-in hybrid option just because it's such a fascinating option in the marketplace and to see what kind of advantages it offers over the Tiguan, which only arrives in a gas version.
So let's see how these untraditional 3-row SUVs perform. Should we go for a drive?
Yeah, let's check them out.
All right. Starting off today in the 2024 Volkswagen Tiguan Highline R-Line. Any more lines? I think we got all the lines.
That's enough lines.
So let's run you through this vehicle, and then we'll sit in the Outlander, run you through that vehicle, and then make some comparisons. Let's start out with the powertrain.
Yeah, so the Volkswagen owners are used to hearing it's a 2-liter turbo. So that's familiar, but the power is a little bit better. This generation of 2-liter turbo is up to 184 horsepower and 221 pound-feet of torque. And I'd say it's pretty good in this application, right?
It's not bad. It's acceptable. The Tiguan's not a huge or overly heavy vehicle, so it gets going well enough. The part that's not as acceptable to me is the 8-speed automatic is fine, but it is a little surgy at low speeds, I find. What do you think?
Yeah, I found when I was doing some parking things, it tended to kind of like leap forward or back, and even at low speeds, right? Also, it's just a little bit lurchy.
It is, and I also found getting up to highway speed and merging onto the highway, it runs out of power just a little bit right at the very top.
Yeah, I didn't mind it on the highway. I thought the adaptive cruise worked well enough. I liked how the controls worked for it and maintained a good space. And one of the characteristics I do like about it, it has a bit of that familiar Volkswagen handling. Now it is a small crossover, so it's no Golf R or something like that, but I still felt it was like buttoned down and it was nice to take into the corners and felt really composed and turned and steered quite naturally.
Standard 4-motion all-wheel drive here on the Tiguan, and that's the case in the Outlander as well, not a differentiating factor. What about that fuel consumption?
Yeah, I mean, this is just a gas engine. It's a 2-liter turbo. As we know, it's like sometimes the turbos can get a little bit thirsty depending on how you drive. In this case, the Tiguan promises 10.9 in the city, 8.1 on the highway, and 9.7 combined. It's not bad for a small crossover, and this is the point of our comparison, where it's a little unfair because we are comparing it with something that's a plug-in hybrid.
However, there is a new generation of Tiguan coming, and we do already know that that generation, in Europe at least, is offering a plug-in hybrid variant, so it could very well be that that evens out once the North American versions are announced, or not. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, despite a new generation that's upcoming, I didn't find that this interior seemed dated at all. I thought some of the materials were pretty good. The touchscreen is not the greatest thing, but it's okay. I'm good with it. It's got the knob for volume and tuning. It's got this nice little Fender stereo in here. It's got a digital gauge cluster. I like a lot about this interior, especially the steering wheel.
Surprisingly stylish for the price point and the segment. Even the gear shifter, being a traditional gear shifter, is not too in the way because the center stack and center console here, it really is quite low, untraditionally low here in the middle, and so there's still some good arm movement room here above where the shifter sits. So that part of it's nice.
The screen is nice and close. It's easy to reach. It's not quite a reach like some of the ones that are high up on the dash.
I do find though that it's too low. It's too small for the size of the vehicle, this screen. This is the largest screen you can get a Tiguan with. It's a 6.5 inch in the entry level, so just even more unacceptable, but this is barely acceptable, and it's too far from the road. I find the driver really has to drop the eye.
Out of your line of vision, which is too bad, and that's the sacrifice you make for having it somewhere it's closer to your hand, not as close to your eyes. Also, both of these interiors do have leather seats, but I would give the Tiguan the edge here. The leather's a little bit nicer, especially on the steering wheel as well. But this one's also got heated and cooled seats, and cooled seats are a feature I just absolutely love. And so because you're not paying a lot of money for that advanced powertrain, you're getting a few more features at the top end of the Tiguan lineup. For practicality, the Tiguan is quite good, right? The second row, spacious enough. These compact crossovers have gotten pretty decent. And with the third row folded, the trunk space is actually better than the Outlander at about 1,000 liters. And that's plenty of room for a few hockey bags and most of your strollers and playpens and things for people with small kids. However, the third row is only fit for really the smallest kids, and then it also requires small kids in the second row in front of them, because if an adult sits in the second row, there's basically no leg room between the third seat and the back of the second row seat. So that's a little bit of a fail entirely on this vehicle.
Well, and let's qualify that by saying both of the cars that we're looking at here are not what North Americans would consider a traditional three-row SUV, right? These are European sensibilities, European measurements, made to European safety specifications. So when a parent is looking at that back of that third row seat, pretty well leaning right up against the glass, maybe not thinking it's the best place for children to spend a lot of time. These are better vehicles for, say, grandparents who very occasionally have young kids they need to get around, more than 2 young kids they need to get around, not something that a family of 5 is going to want to live with every day.
Yeah, and with the third row up, it did seem like the Outlander had a little bit more space, could have had a little bit of a deeper pocket there behind the seats that allowed me to stuff in a little bit more of my hockey bag. So I felt like I'd probably able to add some more shopping bags on top of that if necessary. Finally, pricing. The Tiguan starts at $35,495, and here in this Highline R-Line trim, it leaps all the way up to $46,590. That might seem like a deal once you look at the actual pricing of the Outlander plug-in hybrid, but a regular Outlander would be somewhat equivalent. Still, for that $46,000, you're getting some nice exterior trim bits, some blacked out trim, nice big wheels, and a nice look, plus all the features. As I mentioned, the heated and cooled seats, the digital gauge cluster, and a top-notch stereo system. So this is something where you're getting your Volkswagen value that you typically get, probably not as well content as some of the Korean cars, but still a good package.
To sum it up, I have to say my opinion of the Tiguan is it's fine. It's a perfectly serviceable vehicle, does the job it's intended to do. This version of it, this generation of it though, there's nothing that stands out to me as being exceptional. There's nothing that makes me think I would pick this over X other compact crossover. There's so much on the market, it's so competitive in this segment. Even the fact that it's the only one that you can get in North America with a third row seat doesn't make me go, okay, that's the one that's a standout feature for me.
I still think it's got the looks to attract quite a few people. It's got some nice sleek styling, and it's kind of something, especially in this color, I turn my head and I'm like, it's a nice looking car.
All right, let's hop in the Outlander and go through some more numbers.
Let's go do some electric driving. I'm a little bit infatuated with the Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrid. I think plug-in hybrids are great. They're a great solution, and this is what does it for me.
It's really a good vehicle. So let's run you through the powertrain specs. This Mitsubishi Outlander is based on the same platform as the Nissan Rogue, thanks to that Renault-Nissan-Mitsubishi alliance that began a few years ago. So there are a lot of shared components in here. One thing that is not shared with the Rogue, however, is the powertrain. That comes partially from the previous generation of Outlander PHEV, but here we see a larger battery and more powerful electric motors. So that combines to 2.4 liter 4-cylinder engine with 2 electric motors for super all-wheel control. And you can find a story on Driving.ca about how good that super all-wheel control, all-wheel drive system is. Suffice to say, it's very good. 248 horsepower, 332 pound-feet of torque through a single-speed transmission. And I gotta say, John, the amount of power in combination with how eager this thing is to get going at low speed thanks to that electric power makes this a really, really nice vehicle to drive.
Absolutely. It's really smooth to start off, but then it keeps going. And even if you're kind of trying to be a little bit conservative with the gas pedal,
right,
with the accelerator, in electric mode, you really do get some nice pickup. And when the gas engine comes online, you barely even feel it. It's really quite well executed.
Speaking of electric power, that is a differentiator here. Again, not an extremely fair comparison when we're talking back-to-back against the Tiguan, but let's run you through what that means here in the Outlander, because you get 61 kilometers of electric-only range, provided you start your drive from a full charge. At level 2, you can charge this at a level 2 charger at your home overnight in 6.5 hours. If you don't want to invest in a level 2 charger at home and you just want to use a household plug, it's about 16 hours to get that full charge. So if you could only use 30 kilometers a day and be fine, then you can still do that charge overnight with no problems. Plus, the Outlander PHEV is one of the very few plug-in hybrids that actually accepts a level 3 charge at a fast charger, a public charger. It is CHAdeMO, and that's becoming harder to find, but if you find a CHAdeMO and you want to use it, you can recover your full 61 kilometers in 38 minutes.
We didn't have the Outlander for very long, but on the first day that I used it, I used its full range and depleted the electric battery. But I plugged it in overnight and recovered about 80% of that charge with about a 12-hour charge since when I plugged it into when I set off in the morning. So it delivered that, and it was totally reasonable. And it's the kind of thing where if you're just going on daily errands, you know what, dropping the kids off at school, doing some shopping, or going out there, that overnight charge should be enough to get you through your daily errands on that electric power, and you'd only really be tapping into the gas for longer trips.
So if you drive this with a full charge and use the electric ability as often as possible, you're going to average, according to Natural Resources Canada, 3.6 liters equivalent per 100 kilometers. That's a number that doesn't necessarily mean much unless you do all the math of what you're spending on electric versus fuel. But the end result is it's very, very efficient. If you drive it in hybrid mode only and never charge it, then you're going to average 9.2 liters in the city, 8.7 on the highway, and 9.0 liters per 100 kilometers combined.
And those are slightly optimistic as usual. We're showing for the time we've had with the car, which featured a full charge when I picked it up and another charge when I charged it overnight. And we're showing 7 liters per 100 kilometers. We've got a longer term reading showing on our trip computer, and that one's showing over 13 liters per 100 kilometers. So it could be that some of the previous drivers have not been charging this and have not been taking advantage of that low cost transportation that you get from the electric battery.
Looking through the interior now, nice big panoramic sunroof. We have the same on the Tiguan, so that's not a differentiator. What is all this quilted leather. We were saying in the other car that the leather here isn't quite as a good quality as in the Volkswagen,
but the quilting does elevate the look of the interior and a bit of the feel. But some of the other plastics around the cabin, you can feel that they're not quite up to the same par as Volkswagen.
It is also quite dark in here. It's very black on black on black. At least the headliner is gray, so that lightens it up a little bit. And if the sunroof was open, which it's about to be, that helps as well. But for the most part, it's layers of black plastic and lots of places for fingerprints as well in all this piano black. However, the screen is nice and big, and it's in a good spot, and it has wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. So does the Tiguan, so we got to be fair on that point.
This one also has a digital gauge cluster and the typical driving aids, so the adaptive cruise control. Also, I tested that out. It met my standards that I always test that out. I like using them. We didn't get stuck in any heavy traffic, so hard to say how it deals with the stop and go, but at the same time, on long trips, that's definitely going to take some of the effort out of the driving and make drives more relaxing.
Now we are in the GT-Premium trim here on the Outlander, and that shows us that ventilated seats are not available because we don't have them equipped here on this trim. There is, however, a massaging function for the driver, so that's kind of nice. You don't see that every day.
I just wish I could find the button.
Yeah.
To backtrack a little bit and talk about handling, while I love its low-speed power delivery and how smooth it is at all speeds, it handles more like a bit of an old-fashioned SUV. There's quite a bit of roll. It's nice and soft and comfortable in a lot of places, especially over some bigger bumps and bigger potholes. But it's not that great to drive. It really leans and it tips a little bit. So it's something where it's like you have to drive a little bit slower in this thing, which suits its personality of being an efficient plug-in hybrid electric.
It drives a bit like a boat. It stops like a boat. When you stop, you get that rock back and forth, and that's just a lot of weight being down low where the battery is and giving it a pivot point to go back and forth. So something that you have to understand if you're choosing this vehicle. So we've run through a whole bunch of measurement numbers. We're not going to spit them all out at you because it's going to sound like a bunch of numbers and not mean anything. So here's the crux of it. Surprisingly, the Tiguan is longer slightly than the Outlander, which you wouldn't think by looking at them. However, the Outlander is slightly wider than the Tiguan, which you would think because it's intended to be a slightly larger class of vehicle. So the end result of that is, again, surprisingly, you get better cargo space in the Tiguan. In every configuration except with the third row up, there's a third row divot in the Outlander that gives it a little bit more space when you're using that third row.
I made a specific point of testing those third row myself, as well as asking my son to test them. And his comments about the Outlander was that it was plenty spacious. However, the headrest was like a wooden board because there's almost no padding on it. So that was the one thing that was an outright complaint, but the rest of the space was fine. Now, the Tiguan, on the other hand, was so cramped, and there's barely any space back there. And he did fit back there, so he can survive back there, but he found that the headrest actually pushed too far forward, since it wasn't quite adjusted to his size.
Another point about the headrests, if you're going to be using that third row from the driver's perspective, the headrests on the third row in the Outlander are really very intrusive, and they get in the way a lot of your rear visibility. Not as much in the Tiguan. They are too far forward for the third row passengers' comfort.
But they're smaller, so they don't obstruct the visibility as much.
Lower profile.
And the one other advantage that the Outlander had was the second row seats actually move a lot more smoothly. It took a ton of effort for us to slide the Tiguan seats forward, and both Clayton and I tested this, and it was a struggle. So little kids, forget about it. You're gonna have to help your kids to get back there.
The last thing you need to know before we wrap this up is how much does an Outlander PHEV cost in Canada? So $48,198 is your starting point for the Outlander PHEV for this GT Premium version that we have right here. It's $58,198 before freight and PDI, which is $1950, which gives you an overall price as tested of $61,048. Now you're probably thinking, oh my gosh, that sounds so high. Why would I ever pay that for this vehicle? Right off the top, we get to knock $5,000 off because this qualifies for the federal government's EV purchase incentive. So every Canadian saves $5,000 right off the bat. If you live in Quebec, BC, the territories, or the maritime provinces, then you have an additional provincial or territorial incentive that you can stack on top of that. So depending on where you live, you can come pretty darn close to the top price for the Tiguan for a bigger, more spacious, and overall more practical vehicle with 61 kilometers of electric range.
And more efficient and smoother. Aside from the price, I feel like the Outlander delivers so much more. And if you're living in Quebec or BC or one of the territories that offers the big discounts, the fact that those rebates bring it down to par with the Tiguan make it a bit of a no-brainer. Now, if you're in a province like Ontario where you only get the $5,000 federal rebate, you know, it's not so cut and dry. But for the extra money, this is a much better vehicle. It's got a lot more going on for it, and I just think it's a great offering in the market overall. So it's something worth checking out no matter what, if you're looking at a compact SUV.
So at the beginning of this video, we set up two scenarios. Let's go through them. For the first one, if you need 3 rows and you only got about $40,000 to spend, my answer is none of the above. Suck it up and go buy a Kia Carnival because you're going to get more value for your money. The other one is if you don't want a vehicle that's too large, but you want 3 rows. And between those two behind us here, my winner between them is the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV, not because it's any better at using interior space necessarily, but because it brings so much more to the table.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, the Outlander is the hands down winner. It does have a little bit more space that I found in the trunk, even with the third row up. But in general, it's one of the most affordable and practical plug-in hybrids that you can find on the market. And that's just a powertrain that is really good in this day and age. You get that electric range, but you got the security of having the gas backup so you can go anywhere you want without compromise. And it drives well and does a lot of things well. So I like it. My neighbor's got one and I told him it gets the thumbs up from me.
If the 2025 Volkswagen Tiguan shows up in North America with a plug-in hybrid, we're going to have to do a rematch of this one.
All right, rematch all set up. For Driving.ca, I'm Jonathan Yarconi.
And I'm Stephanie Walcraft. For more comparisons and other features, find us at Driving.ca or visit us on social media.